minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've been sitting here a long time today. So what I'd like to do is take us on a trip through time. I'll take a short trip to yesterday to start with. Yesterday, we passed the Tourism Investment Cambridge Resort and Spa Order 2022. And it passed unanimously, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank members of the House for that. And Mr. Speaker, that was my second important piece of legislation that we had passed in my short time as Minister of Tourism. The first being the Fairmont Southampton Hotel Act 2022. Both very important to the future of our hospitality, our hotel industry, and our economy as a whole. Both evidence of the hard work put in by members of this government. That tourism investment order, Mr. Speaker, had its beginnings back in 2017. But before we go to 2017, let's go back to 2000. In the year 2000, Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Labor Party brought into being the Hotel Concession Act 2000. And that act allowed or provided for duty relief up to 5 years for capital expenditure as it related to hotels. So this government recognized the need to have some formal mechanism in order to encourage investment in 2000 in our hotel product. So if we fast forward, Mr. Speaker, to July 6th, 2022, and with your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read extracts from an article.
Short pieces.
Yes, short pieces, Mr. Speaker. The first says taxpayer-funded financial breaks for the $376 million Fairmont Southampton refurbishment have set a bad precedent for the Elbow Beach Resort as its owners seek a new buyer, a shadow minister believes. We were aware someone was interested in Elbow Beach. I do not believe they were looking for concessions before the Fairmont Southampton deal. Now, how they would know that, I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, but I'll deal with that in a minute. Anybody coming down the line is now going to be interested in new concessions. As we said with that deal, it created a bad precedent, which will impact on Bermudians. The Fairmont Southampton deal has now set a precedent. People will now say, hey, you're obligated to give me these concessions. move a little forward from July 6th. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, those comments were attributed to the Shadow Minister of Tourism, MP Craig Canada. So we fast forward today, to yesterday, Mr. Speaker, back to yesterday. We debated an order of the Tourism Investment Act. It wasn't a special act. It was based on what was allowed and put in place in 2017 by this government, again, recognizing and formalizing incentives that had already been put out in a special act in 2015, but recognizing that, again, it was necessary to encourage investment, not only in hotels this time, Mr. Speaker, but in restaurants and attractions, the full gambit of our tourism products. So we're in 2017, and this government is formalizing that act. But let's go to 2015. You heard, Mr. Speaker, what I just read from July 6th. We're now in July 2015, and we have the St. George's Resort Act 2015 that was brought into being by the now opposition. And I searched, Mr. Speaker, and by the way, that act doubled the previous or the existing provisions from a time frame that were then found under the Hotel Concessions Act. It doubled the 5 years to 10 years and broadened the type of concessions that were allowed. And I searched, Mr. Speaker, on the internet for comments from the now Shadow Minister along the lines of this, that he had concerns that anybody coming down the line is now going to be interested in those new or these new concessions in 2015. I didn't see any comments about concerns of creating a bad precedent which will impact on Bermudians. And neither, Mr. Speaker, did I see any concerns expressed. Couldn't find them. That people will now say, hey, you're obliged to give me these concessions. Couldn't find anything. I actually, to be fair, believe it was necessary in order to attract and secure the development of the St. Regis Hotel. Just as this government and leave the Fairmont Southampton Hotel Act 2022 was the first important step in securing the renovation of that hotel. If we fast forward in our time travel back to yesterday, Mr. Speaker, you heard from the current health minister about improvements being made in a certain area around access to our country. You heard from the current Minister of Tourism an update which was reasonably positive, Mr. Speaker, on how well our tourism industry was recovering. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's move on. Let's take our time travel back to July 1st. So our time travel has revealed that this government has always been concerned about attracting investment in our tourism product and continues right up until yesterday to be concerned and to be out there doing what it can to improve the tourism product and hence tourism in Bermuda. Now, we're at July 1st of this year, Mr. Speaker. And on that day, we listened at length, and many speakers spoke about the anti-social behavior, crime in particular, gun crime, predominantly exhibited by young black males. And rightly so, Mr. Speaker, considering that we had been, or we're discussing, the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2022. And rightly so, Mr. Speaker, because yet another young black man had lost his life in the early hours of the morning. Another victim of gun crime. And Mr. Speaker, whilst I believe that this antisocial behavior, that this scourge of gun crime is perpetuated by a minority of individuals, contrary to the old song, I do believe one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch, especially when it is left in the barrel with the good ones. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I felt it necessary not to pass up another opportunity today without addressing, I guess I didn't want to leave that image, that negative portrayal of our young black man for the summer. I had to address it today. I believe, Mr. Speaker, for every young black man involved in antisocial behavior, there are dozens that are doing the right thing. If we go back to yesterday, on the congratulatory and obituary speeches, I spoke of many of our young people excelling in sport, sailing, rugby, swimming, squash. I spoke of a young lady, Chloe Morton, who's going to India on a 2-year baccalaureate. If we move to Monday of this week, Mr. Speaker, Tuesday of this week, I was fortunate enough to attend an air reception. The room was full of bright, poised, young individuals just out of high school. They represented themselves well in that environment, Mr. Speaker. And I expect big things from them. Many of them are young black men. So what is doing the right thing, Mr. Speaker? Is it in school trying to get a degree, give yourself the best chance of gainful employment? And when I say a degree, it could be academic or technical. Is it already being gainfully employed and making a positive contribution to society, no matter what the job? Whether you're at entry level or part of management, no matter the industry. And Mr. Speaker, this reminds me of a quote by Martin Luther King. If you don't mind, Mr. Speaker, it's a short quote. It says, "No work, no work is insignificant. All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance, and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence." Is doing the right thing both of what I just mentioned previously? Are you in school and working at the same time? Are you trying to get into school for secure employment, Mr. Speaker? There are many who are out there trying to find employment, but they're not involved in antisocial behavior. They're not involved in gang activity. And for all, Mr. Speaker, of our young black men, and this is not to exclude the rest of our young people, but I am speaking specifically to our young black men that are trying to do the right thing. I see you. This PLP government sees you and cares about you. We care about your success. We recognize your efforts, and we know the challenges that you face. And Mr. Speaker, one of the benefits of being the Minister of Tourism and visiting our hotels and some of our restaurants, I'm greeted very often by the top people in the hotel, the top managers in the hotel. And I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, to say many of those faces that are standing there waiting for the minister to get out of the car and walk up to the front of the hotel are young Bermudians. Some of whom are young black man. In fact, if we go back to yesterday, the Cambridge Hotel.
Minister, that indicates that your 20 minutes is up, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I got the point across.
Thank you for your contribution. Does any other member wish to make a contribution this evening? Any other members?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir.